The first time I saw Karen crouch near my driveway, she was holding her phone up like a radar gun, squinting at my license plate as if she were running an FBI sting operation. It was a Saturday morning, 7:42 a.m., and I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when I noticed her reflection glint off my truck's chrome bumper. I thought maybe she'd dropped something, but then she leaned in, tapped her screen twice, and muttered, "Gotcha." At first, I laughed. It was ridiculous. Who tries to scan a neighbor's license plate before breakfast? But when she straightened up and spotted me watching through the kitchen window, her face didn't flicker with embarrassment. Instead, she smiled, a tight, superior little smirk that said she thought she had the moral high ground. I stepped outside. "Morning, Karen. You lose something?" She kept her phone aimed at my truck like she was collecting evidence for a documentary. "Just doing community enforcement. The HOAs had some complaints about non-compliant vehicles." I blinked. "Non-compliant? It's my own driveway." Her tone went sugary. "Exactly. And your vehicle's been parked here overnight more than twice this week. Section 5B of the Neighborhood Covenant clearly states no overnight street-visible parking beyond 2 instances per 7-day period." I sipped my coffee. "Karen, that's my driveway," she sniffed. "Still visible from the street. The board has discretion on what constitutes visual clutter." "Visual clutter," I repeated slowly. "You mean my truck?" "It's large," she said primly, eyes darting over the mud-streaked tires from my weekend fishing trips. "And the decal on the back, 'Life's better with a boat?' might be considered advertising." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Advertising what?" "Enjoying weekends." She didn't answer, just tapped her phone again. "The board will review this." And then she strutted off, heels clicking like a metronome of madness. I figured that was the end of it. Maybe she was bored. Maybe her HOA president badge gave her a false sense of purpose. But then, 2 days later, a formal letter appeared taped to my mailbox. Notice of violation, unauthorized vehicle parking. The photo attached showed my license plate, captured at a weird angle in low light. That's when it clicked. She hadn't just looked at my truck. She'd scanned it, logged it, and sent it to the HOA database. That night, I stood in the driveway under the porch light, staring at the letter. My wife, Mia, came out in her robe. "You're not seriously thinking about confronting her again, are you?" "No," I said. "I'm thinking about lighting up this driveway like a stadium." Mia's brow arched. "You're kidding." But I wasn't. I knew Karen's type. People who thrive on power as long as they're the only ones holding the flashlight. The second you shine one back, they blink. So, I spent the next day installing 2 new LED floodlights on the eaves, motion-activated, 2,000 lumens each, angled straight toward the edge of the property line where Karen usually lurked during her patrols. I wasn't breaking any rule. In fact, Section 3C allowed reasonable exterior lighting for safety. I just planned to be very safe. That night, as I adjusted the sensors, Mia hovered by the garage door. "You're turning this into a war," she warned. "Not a war," I said. "Just illumination." The next morning, I woke to another sight. Karen again. Except this time, she wasn't crouching. She was standing in my driveway holding what looked like a handheld scanner, the kind used for inventory check. I stepped out just as the floodlights, still on test mode, flared to life. The entire driveway exploded in white brilliance. Karen yelped, shielding her eyes. "Good morning," I called cheerfully. "Need help seeing?" Her face was red even under the glare. "You're violating the neighborhood lighting ordinance." "Section 3C, I said smoothly. "Reasonable exterior lighting for safety. These are very reasonable, considering strange people have been sneaking onto my property with cameras." "That's not sneaking," she snapped. "That's enforcement. The HOA has authority to document rule violations." "Not at 6 a.m., I said. "That's just creepy." She stomped off, muttering about unauthorized illumination. By noon, she'd filed a new complaint, this one about light pollution. I almost admired her efficiency. But I wasn't done. 2 nights later, I was in the garage when I heard movement outside. I switched on the security monitor. There she was again, standing behind my fence, phone raised, trying to get another photo of the license plate through the slats. The camera caught her perfectly. I couldn't resist. I toggled the floodlights remote switch. Boom. The whole yard turned white again. Karen screamed, stumbled back, and tripped into the hedge. Mia ran in from the living room. "Oh my God, what happened?" "Just helping Karen with her inspection," I said. She slapped my shoulder but couldn't hide her grin. "You're going to end up on the HOA's hit list." "Already am," I said. "Might as well earn it." The next day, a neighborhood-wide email went out. Residents are reminded that security lighting should not interfere with community harmony. The subtext was clear. Karen had complained, but the board, perhaps tired of her dramatics, had only issued a reminder. For a moment, I thought that might end it. But then I noticed something strange. My mailbox started getting mail addressed to resident, non-compliant vehicle owner. Someone had updated my HOA profile. Then the letters escalated. Anonymous notes, typed on cheap printer paper. "Your lights are blinding the neighborhood. Remove them or face action." I showed Mia. "You think Karen sent these?" She didn't hesitate. "Either that or she's recruiting help." I installed another camera, this time aimed directly at the mailbox. That night, around 10:30, motion detection pinged. The footage showed Karen's husband, Todd, wearing a reflective vest, slipping something into my mailbox. The next morning, I printed stills and brought them to the HOA's community office. The manager, a tired woman named Diane, sighed when she saw them. "Oh, not again." "Again?" I asked. "She's filed reports against 4 other residents this month," Diane said. "One for having too many wind chimes. One for a flagpole that's an inch too high." "So she's an equal opportunity tyrant," I said. Diane gave me a weary look. "We can't officially sanction her unless she violates board conduct. But if you keep documentation..." "Oh, I will." That night, I adjusted my camera angles, double-checked the lights, and set the motion sensor range to full coverage. At 5:42 a.m., they triggered again. Karen was back. This time wearing sunglasses, trying to block the glare while aiming her scanner. She was relentless, like some suburban bounty hunter. I opened the window. "You need a warrant for that, you know." "Stop harassing me," she shouted. "I'm not harassing you," I said mildly. "You're on my driveway. I'm just enjoying the view." She huffed and stormed off again. By breakfast, another letter appeared. "Immediate compliance required, lighting violation escalation." This time, it was hand-delivered, unsigned, and clearly not from the HOA office. Mia stared at it. "She's losing it." "She's about to lose more," I said. "Because if she wants to play surveillance games, she's about to find out I play better." I wasn't bluffing. That weekend, I ordered 2 new motion sensors, a Wi-Fi camera with night vision, and a backup generator just for the lights. If Karen wanted to see excessive illumination, she was going to get a front-row seat. The suburban Cold War had officially begun. By Sunday evening, my driveway looked like a NASA test site. Every motion sensor, every floodlight, every camera was wired into a system I could control from my phone. Even the neighborhood cats started avoiding my property. One glance at the blinding white beams and they'd turn around like professionals avoiding paparazzi. Mia called it the lighthouse. She wasn't wrong. From the street, the setup looked impressive, clean, symmetrical, borderline excessive. But that was the point. Karen didn't respect privacy. She respected dominance. So I gave her a display of it. The piece lasted exactly 36 hours. Tuesday morning, I left for work at 7:15 and noticed something odd. A little orange flag planted by the curb with a laminated tag that read, "Property Survey in Progress." I frowned. There hadn't been any city surveys in our neighborhood for years. Then I spotted the logo, printed in bold at the bottom, KS Compliance Consulting. Karen's initials. I didn't even have time to process before she emerged from her yard wearing a reflective vest, clipboard in hand, and that smug little smirk she wore like war paint. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "Just conducting a light spill survey." Light spill? Yes, your lights are allegedly affecting neighboring lots. The HOA asked me to assess compliance. I leaned on my truck. "Pretty sure the HOA didn't hire you." She held up the clipboard. "I'm volunteering my expertise. The bylaws allow board members to assist with compliance audits." I almost laughed. "And by assist, you mean harass." She shrugged innocently. "If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear." That phrase, the universal battle cry of busybodies, was the final straw. I drove off before I said something I'd regret. By lunchtime, I'd already drafted an email to Diane, the HOA manager, attaching photos of Karen's survey and a polite note. "If residents are allowed to impersonate compliance officers, please confirm so I can order a uniform too." By 5 p.m., Diane replied, "No such authorization has been granted. We'll address it." I thought that might slow Karen down. I underestimated her talent for escalation. That evening, when I got home, there was a brand new security camera mounted on the corner of her roof, angled directly at my driveway. I froze in disbelief. It was like she'd set up her own surveillance counterpoint, a suburban arms race. Mia came out with a dish towel in hand. "You've got to be kidding me." "Nope," I said. "She's filming the floodlights that film her filming the floodlights." "She's obsessed," Mia muttered. "Obsessed and about to get a light show." At sunset, I synced my system's schedule to motion activation. Karen stepped outside and bam! The lights roared to life like a stadium kickoff. She shrieked, covered her face, and stumbled backward into her flowerbed. Her camera glowed red, still recording. The next morning, she left another note: "Cease hostile illumination or face HOA action." I wrote back, hand-delivered, taped to her mailbox: "Cease hostile trespassing or face the police." That night, she retaliated by parking her car directly in front of my driveway, not blocking it entirely, but close enough to make backing out tricky. The plate, of course, was pristine. She probably detailed it before her act of civil obstruction. I didn't bite. I just called the non-emergency police line and reported a possible obstruction of private property access. They came, took a quick look, and left a warning on her windshield. The glare from my floodlights illuminated the officer's note perfectly. Karen didn't wave at me for 3 days. Those were 3 of the most peaceful days I'd had since moving in. But peace never lasts when your neighbor has a pathological need for control. Friday afternoon, I returned home early to find a group of HOA board members gathered on Karen's lawn, clipboards in hand, murmuring like vultures around a carcass. Karen stood at the center, pointing at my house with animated gestures. I didn't even have to guess what it was about. Diane was among them, looking exhausted. She spotted me and gave a small, apologetic wave. I walked over. "Evening," I said pleasantly. "Something I can help with?" Karen jumped in. "We're conducting a board review of your exterior modifications. Your lighting exceeds acceptable limits." Diane sighed. "We're just verifying the angles and brightness, Mr. Hale. Standard procedure." Karen crossed her arms triumphantly. "He's turned this place into an airfield. It's blinding. We can't enjoy our backyard." I smiled faintly. "That's funny. I thought you enjoyed hanging around my yard." Her jaw clenched. Diane rubbed her temple. "Look, both of you, please. We'll test the lighting levels, document it, and issue a report. No further action until then." "Fine by me," I said. "You can test it anytime. Just remember to stand on my property if you want accurate readings." Karen opened her mouth, but Diane cut her off. "Yes, only on his property. Karen, please respect boundaries." The flicker of defeat in her eyes was priceless. By dusk, the board dispersed. I thought the ordeal was finally cooling down. But around midnight, the motion alert pinged again. I opened the app. "Karen." Again. But this time, she wasn't scanning plates or waving clipboards, she was holding a mirror. A full-size hand mirror, tilted toward my floodlight sensor, trying to reflect the beam into my own camera lens. It was such a bizarre, desperate move I almost admired the creativity. I stepped out quietly and stood at the edge of the driveway. "Working on your tan?" She jumped like she'd been tasered. I was just checking something." "At midnight?" Her voice trembled, trying to regain confidence. "Your camera light is violating privacy laws. I have every right to document that." "Document away," I said calmly. "The recording's clearer from this angle." I pointed at the camera above her head, blinking red. She froze, realizing she'd just been caught in 4K again. The next morning, I sent Diane the footage. Her response was immediate. "We'll handle this internally. Please refrain from direct confrontation." For once, I was happy to comply. But Karen didn't know how to back down. That weekend, she escalated in a way that crossed from nuisance to absurdity. She started a petition. Printed flyers appeared on every doorstep. "Protect our privacy. Stop the floodlight menace." With a dramatic photo of my house taken from her yard, brightness exaggerated to look like the sun had landed in my driveway. She'd even gotten a few signatures. Her husband, a couple of her gossip buddies, and one confused retiree who thought he was signing up for a gardening club. I found one of the flyers in my mailbox and laughed so hard I nearly dropped it. Mia didn't find it as funny. "She's making you the villain," she said. "Then I'll play the part," I said. "Every villain needs good lighting." But beneath the sarcasm, I felt the tension building. It wasn't just about lights anymore, it was about territory, control, ego. Karen had decided my property was her project, and she wasn't going to quit until she won. That's when I decided to hit her where it hurt: bureaucracy. Sunday morning, I drove down to the city zoning office with a copy of the HOA bylaws and asked a few questions about residential camera angles and privacy zone. The clerk, a friendly guy named Martin, pulled up the map. "Actually, your property line extends 3 feet past your fence line. City easement rules. If someone's filming from that zone without permission, that's trespassing." "Good to know," I said. Then Martin smiled. "Also, if someone mounts a camera facing another's property beyond 45 degrees of their lot, that's a privacy ordinance violation." Even better. When I got home, I drafted one last, very polite email to Diane with those citations attached, and a time-stamped photo of Karen's roof camera facing my yard. I didn't demand action. I just let the evidence speak. By Monday, her camera was gone. Completely removed. But I knew Karen too well by now. Silence from her wasn't surrender, it was strategy. She was regrouping. That evening, as I relaxed on the porch, I noticed a faint red flash from across the street, a new motion camera mounted on a different neighbor's fence, angled just wide enough to catch my driveway again. Karen had recruited reinforcements. Mia saw it too and groaned. "You think she paid them?" "Probably promised a discount on their HOA dues," I said. She sighed. "You can't keep escalating forever." I smiled, staring at the faint glow of my floodlights reflecting off Karen's windows. "Oh, I'm not escalating." Because the truth was, I'd already started building something that would make her next move impossible. A system she couldn't file against, photograph, or manipulate. She wanted surveillance wars? She hadn't seen anything yet. I spent the next week pretending to ignore Karen. That was important. Psychological warfare worked best when your opponent didn't know what you were planning. I went about my routine like nothing was wrong, mowing the lawn, washing the truck, waving politely at neighbors. But behind the calm smile, I was engineering the next phase of my quiet rebellion. The idea had come to me while watching a documentary about wildlife photography. The narrator mentioned something called adaptive infrared illumination, invisible to the human eye but crystal clear to cameras. If Karen wanted to record my property at night, I'd let her. Only now, she'd be staring at pure blackness while my system saw everything. I ordered the components discreetly. No floodlights this time. Just low-profile infrared panels mounted under the eaves and fence line, connected to a network of cameras only visible on my phone. From the street, it looked like I'd calmed down, lights dimmed, beams softened, nothing offensive. But at night, my property was an invisible fortress. Mia noticed the shift first. "So, you're actually scaling back?" "Sort of," I said. "Think of it as strategic camouflage." She gave me a skeptical look. "That sounds like something the CIA would say before a drone strike." I smiled. Close. By Thursday, everything was online. The system auto-calibrated based on movement and temperature, which meant even a squirrel triggered a faint recording, but that was fine. I wanted precision. I wanted to know the second Karen stepped one toe out of line. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then, Friday night at 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected near driveway. I opened the feed and froze. Karen was back, wearing a hoodie, creeping along the property line with a flashlight. She stopped near the curb, knelt, and placed something metallic against my fence post. The infrared captured it perfectly. I zoomed in. A small black device with a blinking red light. She'd planted a sensor. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't surveillance anymore. This was espionage. The next morning, I walked out with my coffee, acting casual. The device was still there, tucked low near the ground. Crouched, examined it. A Bluetooth tracker, the kind used for geofencing. It was aimed directly at where my truck usually sat. I turned it off, slipped it into an evidence bag, and walked across the street. Karen was trimming her rose bushes. "Morning," I said evenly. "Lose something?" She looked up, startled. "Excuse me." I held up the tracker. "This looks expensive." "Found it by my fence." Her face went white, then pink. I don't know what that is." "Oh, come on," I said softly. "You didn't even bother changing the default network name. It still says KS_compliance_tracker. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I continued, calm as ever. "You should probably know it's illegal to plant recording devices on someone's property. State law calls it unlawful surveillance." She sputtered. "That's ridiculous. The HOA asked me to." "Funny," I said. "Because Diane confirmed yesterday no one authorized any monitoring." For a split second, I saw something shift behind her eyes, panic quickly buried under indignation. "You're making a scene," she hissed. "Oh, not yet," I said. "But I could." I turned and walked away, leaving her frozen among her rose bushes. Mia was waiting on the porch. "You didn't actually threaten her, did you?" "Not directly," I said. "I just showed her what accountability looks like." But I wasn't done. That night, I uploaded the footage, every second of her sneaking around, and scheduled a meeting with Diane at the HOA office. When I arrived Saturday morning, Diane already looked exasperated. "Please tell me this isn't about lights again." I set my phone on her desk and hit play. Karen's hooded figure filled the screen. The infrared made it surreal, her face ghostly, the tracker glowing like a beacon of guilt. Diane's jaw tightened. "Oh, for heaven's sake." "She crossed the line," I said quietly. "Literally and legally." "You're right," Diane said. "This isn't a compliance issue anymore. This is a harassment complaint." I leaned back. "I'd rather not make it official if it can be resolved privately." She raised an eyebrow. "You're being generous." "I'm being strategic," I said. "But if she tries anything again, I'll file a police report." Diane nodded slowly. "Understood. I'll have a word with her." That word must have been one hell of a conversation, because by Monday, Karen's demeanor had changed. She still glared from her porch, but the confidence was gone. Her shoulders slumped. She no longer prowled at dawn. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. Then, midweek, something strange happened. I came home to find a large package leaning against my door. The label read, HOA Compliance Tools, return requested. Inside was a neatly folded reflective vest, a clipboard, and a laminated Field Inspector badge with Karen's name. No note, no message, just a quiet surrender. Mia peeked over my shoulder. "You think she's done?" "Maybe," I said. "But I don't trust silence with her. It's never peace, it's planning." Sure enough, by Friday, I found out what she'd been planning. Around noon, I got a notification: new HOA agenda posted. I opened the PDF and scanned the list. Item 6 jumped out immediately: proposed amendment, limiting exterior lighting to 400 lumens per fixture. Karen had gone political. She'd lost the personal battle, so she was rewriting the rules themselves. I laughed out loud. It was almost brilliant in its pettiness. If she couldn't stop me through complaints or intimidation, she'd change the bylaws to make my setup illegal retroactively. Mia sighed when I showed her. "You're not seriously going to attend that meeting, are you?" "Oh, I'm not attending," I said. "I'm hosting." "What do you mean?" I grinned. "The meeting's in the community hall, right? Guess who maintains the AV system?" She stared at me. "You didn't." Let's just say the lighting during her presentation is going to be thematic. The night of the meeting, the room was packed. Karen stood at the front, her hair sprayed into submission, holding a laser pointer like a general preparing for battle. She started strong: slides about community harmony, light pollution, and neighborly courtesy. But the moment she switched to the slide showing my house as the example, the projector's automatic brightness system, which I'd calibrated earlier that day, adjusted to 200% output. The screen blazed white, flooding the room. Karen flinched, covering her eyes. What's happening?" Someone in the back laughed. "Guess that's his floodlight level." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Diane cracked a smile. Karen fumbled with the remote, cheeks burning, while the system automatically dimmed again. She tried to continue, but the room had turned. Her authority, her control, was slipping in real time. When the vote came, the amendment failed 12-1. Only Todd raised his hand in support. Afterward, Diane pulled me aside. "That was entertaining. But you might have humiliated her more than you realize." "I didn't do anything," I said innocently. "The system just adjusted." Diane chuckled. "Right. Just keep an eye out. People like her don't take defeat quietly." She was right. Karen didn't retaliate immediately. But 3 nights later, my floodlights flickered, once, twice, then went dark. I stepped outside. The breaker box was intact. Power was fine. But the floodlights, completely dead. When I checked the cameras, I saw a faint blur near the power conduit. Someone had cut the wire. It wasn't a total blackout, though. The infrared sensors still worked. And sure enough, 10 seconds later, the cameras caught movement. Karen, in her robe, standing on the sidewalk, holding a flashlight, staring at my now dark driveway. She whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but her lips clearly formed the word, "finally." Then she smiled. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I let her think she'd won. Because in that moment, I realized the battle wasn't about lights anymore. It was about control, hers versus mine. And I was done reacting. It was time to end this war on my terms. That night, I drew up a plan. Simple, legal, and guaranteed to make her crack. I wasn't going to fight her in the dark. I was going to drown her in daylight. I woke up before dawn with a plan that felt ridiculous in the best possible way. If Karen wanted surveillance theater, I would give her a daytime performance she could not ignore. The trick was to make the neighborhood see what she would rather everyone forget, that she had been the one sneaking around in the dark, planting devices and prodding at people's lives. Public humiliation is crude, but it's efficient when aimed at a petty tyrant. I drank coffee and sketched a plan that was equal parts civic and theatrical. First, logistics. I booked a permit for a small daytime gathering in my yard under the guise of a neighborly meet and greet. The HOA allowed occasional events, so I filled out the form honestly. 100 guests maximum, snacks, and a short talk about safety. I emailed neighbors with a warm, official tone, and the RSVP line filled faster than I expected. People were curious. Gossip spreads faster than any flyer. I recruited allies. Diane warned me to keep it civil, but she signed off on the permit and offered to moderate. Mr. Perez volunteered his camera. Jenna from the PTA offered to handle seating and refreshments. I made sure to invite anyone who'd mentioned odd visits in passing. Those small confessions become a chorus when collected. If I painted it as community education, I could gather witnesses without sounding accusatory. On the morning of the event, the yard looked charming. Folding chairs, a lemonade stand, Mia's cookies, and a low podium with a borrowed microphone. A tasteful banner read, "Neighborhood Safety and Harmony," so it felt civic rather than confrontational. I set up a rented projector aimed at the garage door, not because I wanted spectacle but because evidence needs a screen. Neighbors arrived early, families, retirees, teenagers. Mr. Perez lugged his DSLR like an old friend. People swapped small talk, then stories. Who'd seen a flashlight at odd hours, who had mirror flashes through their windows, who'd found strange flyers. The mood shifted from mild curiosity to mounting irritation. When people realize there's a pattern, they stop being polite about it. I asked Diane to explain the laws around surveillance and privacy, and she did it succinctly. What's allowed for security versus what's illegal for intrusion. Karen watched from across the street, arms crossed, trying to appear unconcerned. Diane spoke about planting devices, recording without consent, and the boundaries of property law. Her voice was calm, and the information landed like a series of small but solid stones in a pond. Then I projected the footage. The infrared clip of Karen in a hoodie, the tiny tracker blinking at the fence, filled the garage door. It was quiet, unadorned, looping on a soft repeat. Time seemed to slow, neighbors leaned forward. The image did the work my words could not. It showed her in the act, not as a caricature but as evidence. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs, a few gasps, a neighbor muttering that he'd suspected something, and Todd looking awkward as a man who'd suddenly realized he was the odd one out. Word spread. People who hadn't RSVP'd arrived after seeing posts on the neighborhood group. Someone live-streamed a clip. Within hours, Facebook threads filled with screenshot. Diane convened an impromptu board meeting on my lawn. The mood was no longer a private spat. It had become a civic concern. Karen tried to counter with a practiced explanation about checking compliance. Up close, her voice sounded thin. Mr. Nguyen, who'd had packages rifled through, stood up and told his story about something else entirely. Someone rifled through his deliveries. Installing trackers on neighbors wasn't protection, it was part of the problem. His simple line landed harder than any procedural argument. The board discussed options and, after some debate, recommended a temporary suspension of Karen's volunteer duties pending an investigation and a requirement she remove any equipment. The petition to suspend her collected signatures rapidly. Todd, once confident, hovered near his house like a man reconsidering a bad investment. That night, Karen's dignity crumpled in plain view. She stood on her porch and called my name, voice cracking as she demanded I remove the footage. "You humiliated me," she said. Her anger sounded less like righteous fury than fear. I walked over slowly and said I would be willing to mediate, if she agreed to return equipment and cease private patrols. She nodded, trembling, and for the first time I believed she might stop. For a few days there was quiet. Karen kept to her porch, which might have been restraint or calculation. I couldn't tell yet. The block appeared relieved. People said hello in the street without the nervous edge that had been there for weeks. I slept better too. But I also knew this kind of public defeat rarely ends a person's involvement. It reroutes them. Losers in public dramas often incubate a comeback. True to that, within a week a neighbor reported a new problem, a missing set of seasonal wind chimes that had vanished from a porch 2 houses down overnight. It was minor, but it felt like a message, small thefts as pawns in a petty war. I tightened security on better terms. More visible cameras, clear signage about private property, and a polite note on the neighborhood board warning against unauthorized equipment. The dynamic had changed. People no longer shrugged off oddities. They recorded them, saved clips, and contacted Diane with timestamp. The community had learned to look, and that combined gaze was the most effective deterrent. Karen's small maneuvers, which had seemed powerful alone, now swam under a light that made them obvious and petty. In the days that followed, I saw Karen less. She drove past more slowly, lingered at crosswalks once or twice, but no more late-night skulking. The HOA's temporary measures remained in place while an investigation crawled forward at the predictable speed of bureaucracies. The satisfaction I felt was mixed with unease. Public victories have consequences beyond the immediate moment. People who feel exposed sometimes retaliate in ways that are quieter and more insidious. Still, the meet and greet had done what I intended. It shifted the war into a communal context where rules, not vendettas, applied. That felt right. I'd wanted accountability without escalation, and for a sliver of time I'd gotten it. The night after the meeting, I sat on the porch with Mia and watched the street lamps blink on, thinking about how small towns and suburbs function on invisible agreements. We sleep better when rules are enforced fairly. The lull didn't last forever. But that was the thing about this neighborhood. Its equilibrium is delicate, easily tipped, and always subject to human drama. For now, though, I allowed myself to enjoy the quiet, knowing full well that quiet is just the next act waiting to be written. I wasn't naive. I knew Karen's type. Public defeats bruise them, but they also sharpen resolve. Still, watching neighbors reclaim their sense of safety felt like more than revenge. It felt necessary. Whatever came next, it wouldn't start in the dark. If she tried another move, she'd find an entire block awake and watching. For now, that had to be enough. By the next week, the suburban détente had dissolved. The neighborhood cookouts and friendly nods had returned to cautious glances, and I could feel the tension humming beneath the quiet like a live wire buried under grass. Karen wasn't done. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was pressure building under a lid. Then, on Monday morning, it happened. A new letter on my doorstep, handwritten this time, not official HOA stationery. Enjoy your daylight, Mr. Floodlight. The sun sets eventually. Mia read it over my shoulder and said flatly, "She's going off the rails." "I know," I said, folding it carefully. "But now she's leaving paper trails." "That's good." That night, I took my own advice and added another layer to my defenses. Solar-powered motion floods, hidden in the shrubs and trees. Legal, subtle, and self-charging. They blended into the landscape, but would turn my property into a daytime glare if anyone approached after dark. I'd moved from playing defense to psychological deterrent. The next morning, the neighborhood message board exploded. Someone had posted, anonymously of course. Certain residents continue to weaponize lighting and intimidation against others. The HOA should consider stronger oversight. The replies piled up fast. Most residents were fed up with both sides, but a surprising number defended me. One even wrote, "At least the guy keeps the street safe. Karen's the only one creeping around at night." Karen tried replying under her name, citing community wellness and optical pollution. But by then, the tone had turned. The suburban tide had shifted against her. I stayed out of it. Sometimes, silence wins louder than argument. That Friday Diane called. "You might want to come down to the office. There's been a development." When I arrived, she looked weary but relieved. "The board met last night. We're instituting a temporary suspension of Karen's HOA privileges. No enforcement actions, no patrols, no direct complaint. She's been told to take a step back." I blinked. "They actually did it?" She nodded. "There was enough evidence of harassment. Between your footage, the tracker, and the community complaints, well, the board couldn't ignore it anymore." A slow grin spread across my face. "So she's benched." "Officially, yes. Unofficially, I'd stay alert." "She's angry." Of course she was. And I didn't have to wait long to see how angry. That night, at exactly 10:15 p.m., every single one of my floodlights went off, again. This time, not a power cut. Someone had sprayed them with black paint. I discovered it the next morning. The lenses were slick and opaque, coated like vandalized storefront glass. On my driveway, faint boot prints led toward the street. I crouched down and smiled grimly. Karen's shoes had a distinct heel pattern, a diamond cutout design I'd seen 100 times during her sidewalk patrols. I didn't clean it. I photographed everything. Then, I took a small but deliberate step. I sent the photos to the HOA board with a brief note. Seems my property's been vandalized. Please advise whether the community's suspension of Karen includes restitution or if I should involve law enforcement. Within an hour, Diane replied, please do not confront her directly. The board will investigate. But I wasn't waiting for bureaucratic mercy anymore. I went to work on something that would shift the game permanently, a daylight demonstration she couldn't twist into a rule violation. I installed a set of mirrored aluminum privacy panels along the inside of my fence. Legal height, HOA-approved color, perfect reflectivity. From my side, they looked like sleek modern barriers. From hers, they turned her view into a distorted image of herself. The panels reflected sunlight straight toward her patio every afternoon around 3, the exact hour she liked to sit and gossip. By the second day, I heard her voice through the hedge. It's blinding. You're harassing me. Mia just shook her head. You're provoking her. No, I said. I'm teaching her optics. Karen complained to the HOA, naturally. But Diane responded coolly this time. The panels meet all design codes. No violation detected. That small message was better than victory. It was validation. 3 evenings later, as the sun hit the mirrors at full strength, I watched from the porch. Karen came outside in her floppy hat and sunglasses, clutching her phone, muttering to someone on speaker. They're retaliating. This is targeted aggression. I leaned back in my chair. Just enjoying the sunset, I said, loud enough to carry. She froze, realizing I could hear her. Then she stomped inside and slammed her door. The neighborhood felt lighter after that. For once, the power balance had flipped. She stopped her sidewalk patrols. The nightly clicking of her phone camera vanished. For almost a week, there was peace. Then came the smell. One morning, I walked out to find my yard reeking like burnt plastic and vinegar. Something had been poured onto the edge of my lawn, leaving black streaks across the grass. At first, I thought it was oil, but when I leaned closer, I saw crystals forming along the edge, fertilizer mixed with bleach. Enough to scorch a 10-foot line along the fence. It wasn't subtle. It was a message. She couldn't stop me with rules, so she'd poison the ground. Mia was furious. You're calling the cops. I wanted to. Every instinct screamed to end this. But I also knew the kind of story Karen would spin. He's retaliating, he's paranoid, he's lying to smear me. So I did what she couldn't. I stayed calm and strategic. I took samples, logged timestamps, saved footage of her sprinklers running oddly at 3 a.m. that same night. Then I filed a quiet report with the city's Environmental Control Division. They didn't need drama, they just followed data. 3 days later, a city inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, walking the property line. He scraped samples, took photos, asked calm, procedural questions. I barely had to say a word. Karen came out mid-inspection, all indignation and feigned confusion. Is there a problem, officer? The inspector, without looking up, said, We're investigating possible chemical runoff originating from this property line. Her voice went high. That's absurd. I don't even use fertilizer. He pointed at the small, unmarked container sitting behind her garden hose, half empty, crusted around the edges. You might want to keep that story consistent, ma'am. The look on her face, pure panic, was worth every sleepless night. By the time they left, she looked deflated. The next morning, her lawn service came and dug up a section of her flower bed, hauling away bags of soil. The HOA quietly announced a mandatory environmental review for all members, but everyone knew who caused it. That evening, I sat on my porch again, floodlights back in full working order, watching the sun dip behind her now empty flower patch. Mia joined me, resting her head on my shoulder. "You finally won." I shook my head. "Not yet. She'll either double down or disappear. It's who she is." But I didn't realize how right I was until the following week, when I came home to something that made every prior move look childish. My truck's license plate cleanly removed. Bolt still in place, plate gone. Karen hadn't just scanned it this time. She'd taken it. The war had just crossed the final line. And I wasn't going to use light to fight this round. I was going to use the law. I stood in the driveway staring at the empty spot where my license plate had been. It was such a small thing, 2 missing pieces of metal, but the implications hit like a punch. Karen had gone from neighborhood harassment to criminal theft. I didn't even feel angry at first, just stunned by the absurdity. Who steals a plate from someone they've already been caught stalking? Mia stepped outside with her keys, freezing when she saw it. "Please tell me you took it off to wash." I shook my head slowly. She finally did it. Mia ran a hand through her hair. "You're calling the police right now?" I did. 2 officers showed up within 20 minutes. A young patrolman named Knox and his partner, a woman named Rivera who looked like she'd seen every HOA feud imaginable. Rivera squatted near the bumper, taking photos. "Clean removal," she said. "No damage. Whoever did this had tools and knew exactly what they were doing." Knox flipped open his notepad. "You have any idea who'd want to take it?" Mia let out a dry laugh. "Oh, we've got a few suspects." I didn't even bother pretending. "It's my neighbor, Karen Shaw. She's on the HOA board, suspended recently for harassment. She's been documenting my vehicle for months." Knox raised an eyebrow. "Documenting?" Rivera nodded knowingly. "We get that. The neighborhood watch turned dictator type?" "Exactly. They took my statement, then asked to review security footage. I brought them inside and pulled up the infrared feed. Sure enough, at 2:38 a.m., the cameras caught movement. A woman-shaped silhouette crossing from Karen's side, flashlight beam cutting across the driveway, a glint of metal as she worked on the bolt. Then she walked off, carrying something flat under her arm. Rivera leaned in. "That's enough for probable cause. Can you get it back?" I asked. "We'll pay her a visit," Rivera said, standing. "Don't confront her. If she's willing to sneak around at this level, she's already unhinged." They left, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to prove I wasn't crazy. Someone else had seen the pattern, seen her cross the line. Mia tried to calm me with breakfast, but I barely tasted anything. I just kept picturing Karen watching from her window as the police walked up her driveway. Around 10:30, Rivera called back. We spoke with Mrs. Shaw. She denied everything, of course, but when we asked to check her property, she refused, until we mentioned the footage. And she got nervous. Said her husband might have moved something from the street by mistake. Long story short, we found your plate. In her garage. Hidden behind a trash bin. Mia clapped a hand over her mouth. "Oh my God." Rivera sighed. "She's lucky you didn't press for full charges. I logged it as recovered stolen property and issued a formal warning. But if you want to file a restraining order, the report's ready." "I do," I said instantly. "I'm done playing defense. Then go down to the county clerk's office this afternoon. Mention my name, they'll expedite it." I thanked her, hung up, and exhaled for the first time that morning. It was over. Or it should have been. Karen must have realized how bad it looked, because by the afternoon, she was outside trimming her hedges like nothing happened. I walked out to reinstall the plate. She waved. Actually waved. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" she called. "Yeah," I said, not looking up. "Perfect day for staying in your own yard." Her smile didn't waver. "Oh, don't be dramatic. Mistakes happen." I laughed softly. Taking someone's license plate isn't a mistake, Karen. It's a felony. Her lips tightened. You're exaggerating. It was temporary custody. I thought it looked loose. Mia came out, arms crossed. Temporary custody? Of his property? Are you listening to yourself? Karen's eyes flashed. You should thank me. I was preventing a safety hazard. I straightened up, meeting her stare. Karen, I have a police report with your name on it. The only reason you're not in jail right now is because I gave you mercy. Don't test it. For a moment I thought she might scream. But then something shifted. Her expression went strangely calm, eerily calm. Fine, she said. If that's how you want to play it, then I'll see you at the next board meeting. And just like that, she turned and walked inside. Mia looked at me. She's planning something. I know, I said quietly. But now she's on record. Every move she makes from here is a gift. That evening, I drove to the clerk's office and filed for a restraining order. Rivera's report made it easy. Within 48 hours, the judge signed it. Karen was legally barred from coming within 50 feet of my property or contacting me in any way. When the officer served her the paperwork, she lost it. I watched from the porch as she argued, waving her hands in disbelief. The officer pointed to the clause, shrugged, and left her standing there red-faced, shaking. It should have been the end. A sane person would have taken the loss and moved on. But Karen's ego didn't run on sanity, it ran on control. And when she couldn't control me, she tried to control the story. 2 days later, a Facebook post appeared in our local community group. Some residents have been spreading lies about me. I only ever tried to make our neighborhood safe. Unfortunately, bullying and false accusations have ruined that. Please know I'm still here for those who care about fairness and integrity. The comments were split. Half the neighborhood mocked her, the other half shrugged it off as typical drama. I didn't engage. She wanted a reaction. I gave her silence. But Karen wasn't finished. She'd lost her power within the HOA, but she still had access to something more potent: narrative. The following week, someone delivered flyers door to door titled "The Truth About the Floodlight Feud." It was 5 paragraphs of self-righteous nonsense, painting me as a paranoid neighbor with a vendetta against community standards. She even printed stills from my own security footage, cropped to make me look menacing. Mia slammed one down on the table. She's completely lost it. I nodded slowly. And she just gave me defamation in print. So I did something I hadn't planned. I hired an attorney. His name was Walter Gray, mid-50s, calm, analytical, and clearly amused by the absurdity of it all. "You've got a goldmine here," he said after reading the flyer. "Defamation, trespassing, harassment, property damage. It's a trifecta of stupidity. We can file a cease and desist by tomorrow." "Do it," I said. "I want this on paper. No more warnings." He drafted it that night. 3 pages, perfectly worded. Formal notice, legal consequences, references to prior police involvement. It ended with a simple line: "Further contact will result in immediate civil action." We hand-delivered it through certified mail. The next day, she retaliated, not with words this time, but with a performance. As I pulled into the driveway after work, I saw her standing on her front lawn holding a sign that said, in bold black marker, "Stop the harassment. End the lies." She'd even called the local paper, who showed up with a camera crew expecting a protest. It was so outrageous I had to laugh. She looked like a suburban activist campaigning against reality itself. Walter called me later, voice calm as ever. "Don't engage. Let her melt down publicly. She's digging her own hole." He was right. Within hours, the photos were online, and the comments section did the rest. Neighbors mocked her for turning a street spat into a spectacle. Someone even posted, "Isn't that the lady who stole a license plate?" Her little protest fizzled out by sundown. The next morning, the sign was gone, and her blinds were drawn tight. For the first time in months, true quiet settled over the neighborhood. No lights, no letters, no shadowy figures at night. I almost didn't trust it. It felt like a pause before the final act. That weekend, Diane called again. Just wanted to let you know the board's finalized her removal. Karen's been officially dismissed from all HOA positions. She can't file or enforce any complaints. I exhaled slowly. That's something. It's more than that, Diane said. We're also revising the bylaws to require board oversight for any surveillance-related enforcement. Your situation prompted a real change. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. All the petty battles, the sleepless nights, the floodlights, they'd actually led to something constructive. After the call, I walked outside and looked at my house, my yard, my truck gleaming under the midday sun. Peace, for once, didn't feel like an illusion. Mia came out with 2 beers and handed me one. Think it's really over? I watched Karen's house. Curtains closed, blinds down, car untouched for 2 days. Yeah, I said quietly. She's finally run out of control to lose. But deep down, a small part of me wasn't convinced. People like Karen don't vanish. They lie dormant, waiting for attention to drift away. And that thought, unspoken, lingering like static, was what kept me checking the cameras one last time before bed, scanning the quiet street, half expecting to see her silhouette standing under the streetlight. For now, the feed was empty. But the glow of those floodlights across the driveway still burned, steady and unblinking, my final line of defense in a neighborhood that had learned what happens when power and obsession meet a little too close to home. For almost 2 weeks, peace felt real. Karen's house went dark most nights. No movement behind the curtains, no petty flyers, no cryptic notes. The neighborhood had started to breathe again. People smiled when they passed my driveway, as if collectively relieved that the tension had finally broken. Even Diane seemed lighter at the next HOA gathering, joking that we'd all survived the Great Floodlight War. But I'd lived next to Karen long enough to know quiet wasn't her surrender, it was her reset. When people like her lose their audience, they don't give up. They plot their encore. It began one Friday morning when I found a sleek, unfamiliar SUV parked across the street, idling. Inside sat a man in aviators holding a clipboard. He wasn't from the HOA or the city. I walked over. "Can I help you?" He smiled politely. "Afternoon, sir. I'm with Brightside Neighborhood Survey. Just conducting a community standards assessment." I frowned. "Never heard of that." He flashed a badge that looked official, too official. "We're contracted for HOA compliance checks." "Funny," I said, "since our HOA doesn't subcontract without a board vote. And I'm on speaking terms with the manager." He hesitated just long enough to confirm my suspicion. "Have a nice day," I said. He drove off. That evening, I called Diane. "You ever heard of Brightside Surveys?" "No," she said immediately. "Why?" "Because one of Karen's friends was parked outside my house pretending to be with them." Diane groaned. "Unbelievable. She's trying to outsource her vendetta now." I hung up and checked my cameras. Sure enough, at 3:12 p.m., the SUV had parked for 12 minutes, aimed directly at my property. The rear plate? Temporary. No number, just a dealer tag. Karen was back to surveillance by proxy. Mia didn't even hide her frustration. "You have a restraining order. Can't she be arrested for this?" "Not unless I prove she sent him," I said. "And she's too clever to leave a trail this time." Except Karen's cleverness always had one fatal flaw: ego. 3 nights later, while reviewing footage, I noticed a reflection in the SUV's window during one of its return visits. There, faint but clear, was Karen's silhouette standing on her porch, phone raised. She was photographing her own spy. That was all I needed. I called Rivera, the officer who'd handled the plate theft. She reviewed the footage, sighed, and said, "You've got a pattern of harassment, and this violates her restraining order. We'll handle it." The next morning, police cruisers idled in front of Karen's house. She tried to argue, gesturing wildly, clutching papers, but they weren't buying it this time. After 15 minutes, they led her inside and came out with a single box of electronics. Phones, a laptop, a stack of files. Karen wasn't arrested that day, but she was charged with a misdemeanor violation of a court order. It might have been minor legally, but socially it was a death sentence. The whole neighborhood saw. By the weekend, Karen's house looked abandoned. Curtains stayed drawn, and the for sale sign appeared by Monday. The legend of the HOA tyrant was ending not with a bang but with a yard posting. When the for sale sign went up, Mia popped open a bottle of wine. "We should host a goodbye party," she joked. I raised a glass. To peace and good riddance. But I couldn't shake one question. Why the sudden sale? Even cornered, Karen wasn't the type to walk away quietly. She'd built her entire identity around this neighborhood. Leaving it behind felt like losing her crown. The answer came in the form of a letter, delivered by courier, sealed in thick cream paper, addressed not to me but to the HOA board. Attention, Community Ethics Committee. I wasn't supposed to see it, but Diane called me that evening anyway. "She filed a formal complaint against you," Diane said, "accusing you of harassment, property modification, and slander. It's extensive." I laughed. "So, she's weaponizing bureaucracy one last time." "Essentially," Diane said. "But don't worry, the board isn't taking it seriously. After what she pulled, she has no credibility left." Still, I asked her to send me a copy. The document was 12 pages long, filled with elaborate accusations: light trespass, emotional distress, neighborhood intimidation. It even included screenshots of my Floodlights brightness specs from the manufacturer's website, as if that proved criminal intent. But one line stood out, buried near the end. "Subject has engaged in continuous monitoring of my property using hidden cameras positioned beyond his legal boundary." That line made me pause. Because it wasn't entirely false. Technically, one of my infrared cameras did catch a sliver of her driveway. Legal under incidental capture, but if she'd measured the footage, she could twist it. I realized she wasn't trying to win anymore. She was trying to smear me enough that when she left, she could paint herself as the victim. Mia caught me staring at the letter. "You're not thinking of responding, are you?" "No," I said, folding it. "I'm going to let her dig her own hole. The truth's already public." But part of me couldn't help wondering how deep her obsession really ran. The next day, the moving trucks arrived. 2 of them. I watched from the porch as boxes piled into the driveway, carefully labeled, as if she'd planned this for weeks. Karen stood on her porch, barking orders at the movers, wearing oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Even in defeat, she had to look in control. When the last truck pulled away, she lingered at her front door, staring across the street at my house. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she raised her hand, not to wave but to take one last picture. Click. And she was gone. The silence that followed felt strange. Almost too big. A week later, her house sold to a young couple, a teacher and a nurse, who immediately put out a bird feeder and solar garden lights. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The neighborhood started to heal. Kids played outside again. The HOA stopped sending passive-aggressive memos. For the first time in months, the street felt normal. But normalcy comes with its own kind of emptiness. I'd spent so long reacting to Karen's chaos that without her, the quiet felt hollow. Like winning a war only to realize you missed the noise. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the new neighbors hang string lights, I noticed a flicker in my camera feed. A single motion alert from the far edge of the yard. Probably an animal, I thought, until I zoomed in. There, on the grass by the fence, sat a small box. Unmarked. New. I froze. Walked out slowly, keeping the camera rolling. It was a wireless motion sensor, fresh batteries, still blinking. Same make and model Karen used. I looked around, no one on the street. Just quiet houses and crickets. I turned the device over. On the back, scratched faintly with a key, were 3 words: "Still watching you." For a second, every instinct screamed that she'd come back. But when I checked the street cams later, the footage showed something stranger. A delivery van had stopped briefly, lights off, door sliding open for 5 seconds before speeding off. The driver's face was obscured, but the tag number traced back to a rental company in another county, paid in cash. Karen was gone, but her paranoia had lingered like a ghost. I didn't report it. I just tossed the sensor into the trash and deactivated my motion alerts for the night. If she wanted to haunt me with symbols, fine. She'd already lost the real battle. A few weeks later, Diane called one last time. "You'll like this," she said. The HOA got a letter from Karen's new community association up north. Apparently, she's already filed complaints about her neighbors' wind chimes. I laughed until my ribs hurt. She's consistent, at least. Guess she'll always find a battlefield, Diane said. Not mine anymore, I said, watching the floodlights glow against the twilight. When I finally shut them off, the driveway sank into darkness, peaceful, complete, earned. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel the need to keep the world illuminated. Because the real victory wasn't in blinding her with light. It was in outlasting her without losing myself in the glare. Somewhere out there, Karen was probably standing on another porch, clutching another clipboard, starting another war she couldn't win. But that was her cycle, not mine. Mine was simple: my house, my yard, my calm. And if the floodlights ever came back on again, it wouldn't be out of fear. It would be to remind myself of the night I stopped letting her darkness define my world.